You might recognize this computer from a recent video we did about a 10-year-old computer versus a new computer, and then how the 10-year-old computer had something die in the middle of that video. If you guys have not actually seen that video, please go and watch that first, because that led us into the discussion we're going to be talking about today. You've seen me upgrade old laptops in the past, and I've always talked about how you can make old hardware feel like newish again by a couple of simple and easy upgrades. So today we're going to take this 10-year-old computer and see if it can't be somewhat enjoyable with, I'm not going to say as little money as possible, but definitely with a limit of money that's possible. NZXT's build is the simplest way to get a gaming PC customized the way you want this holiday season. Choose the games you want to play, set a budget, and let Build take care of the rest. The all-new starter, streaming, and creator PCs take the guesswork out of finding a PC that meets your budget and gaming needs, and with a 48-hour turnaround backed with NZXT's 2-year all-in-one warranty and same-day shipping available with Blitz mode, you can start enjoying your new PC right away. To see what NZXT Build can do for you, click the sponsored link in the description below. So the specs of this rig, this is actually Phil's friend's old gaming rig that he was using up until like as recent as last year. So anyway, the specs on this are pretty basic. It's a Q9400, so it's a Core 2 quad, which means it's a 4-core. This is long before like the i5, i7 era, quite a ways before Sandy Bridge and all that. It is running on a budget version of a budget motherboard at the time. So this is like the budget's budget, and I don't even remember the model number on here. It's a Gigabyte G41M ES2L. I used to have a Gigabyte that I overclocked on, by the way. That was of this same era, the LGA 775 socket era, and it was a Gigabyte DS3, which is like the DS3 series is still technically around, but I had amazing overclocking results with that. But this one here doesn't really support overclocking, as far as I know, but we will take a look at that. It's got a newer Antec 650 power supply in there because when it came, when Phil brought it to the studio, it had one of those gray, like, included with your case type power supplies. And I was like, for the love of God, get that out of here. For RAM, we've got 4 terabytes of...
4 terabytes?
Wow.
Wow.
It's got 4 gigabytes of PDC-24G... 800 megahertz DDR2. For the CPU, I already mentioned, it's a box cooler on there. Now for the graphics card, it was an XFX R7750 Ghost Thermal Technology card. Hey, metal cooler though. But they don't make them like this no more. Anyway, so when we did the video where we talked about 10-year-old PC versus a new PC, the two things that were clearly evident. One, the graphics card was perfectly fine for like source titles and stuff back then. It would get the job done. I feel like a lot less people were really on the 60 FPS kick like they are today. I feel like most people back then were, I know myself included, I didn't monitor FPS like I do today. That's sort of, as technology has advanced and as we've seen bigger and better graphics cards and advancement of technology, we just kind of really, it's like drag racing now. We just get a kick out of how fast is it? I spent a lot less time back then really worrying about that because I had what I could afford and that was it. Who cared? That was my performance and it wasn't changing. That's kind of what this box represents. So the graphics, although was being handedly smashed by a 1650, which is the very bottom offering from NVIDIA's current lineup, what was painful about this system, quite honestly, was its I/O. And that being the fact that it was even on a modern 2 terabyte, 7200 RPM, 64 megabyte cache, 2 terabyte Seagate Barracuda drive, sitting right there. That's way better than any hard drive that actually existed back then. So, well, okay, caveat, there was the Western Digital Raptor and all that sort of stuff, which was really expensive. But they also were low capacity, high speed. But for the sake of the last video, we threw this hard drive in there because we wanted it to be reminiscent of the era. Now, Phil was telling me that he did, to speed this computer up, he did put an SSD in there, but when his friend upgraded and changed computers, the SSD came out. So games and big items went on a hard drive, which is perfectly fine. If the hard drive is not having to handle all the system operations, then it's actually not that slow. And he had an SSD in there for a boot drive, but obviously the graphics card could stand. I mean, that's just, look at that. Anyway, I have done this now 4 or 5 times in the history of my channel, showing you that a solid state drive is the cheapest, easiest way to make your system faster. And you know why I keep making these videos? Because people still want to argue that that isn't true, that hard drives are perfectly fine. The only people who say that are people who've actually never experienced an SSD. And although rarer today than it was in the last, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, there still are folks out there, I'm sure watching this very video, who've never experienced a solid state drive. They for whatever reason, they're afraid of the tech. They're afraid of the chips failing or something. I'm gonna continue to beat this point until the horse is like decomposed and returned to the earth and a flower is growing where that corpse was.
Beat the flower.
Yeah, then I'm gonna smash the flower and I'm gonna push it back into the ground. But while we're at it, we're gonna go ahead and throw in an RX 570 8GB graphics card from PowerColor. The one that was from our original budget build earlier this year doesn't even have a logo or label on the side, because you can still get this this graphics card for about 160 bucks on Newegg right now. It's a very good deal. It is light years ahead of this XFX card from the 7700 series. And so with these two things right here, we are going to see just how much this system wakes up versus before. But one thing I want to mention here real quick. A lot of people might be like, but Jay, that's, you know, $200 or so right there. Why not just go out and buy yourself a $200 combo pack like you can find from Micro Center or Newegg or whatever retail center you might have? And this comment repeats itself every time I do this video. But the problem is I don't think people think before they make those types of comments, because let's look at it this way. We're reusing the motherboard, we're reusing the CPU, and we're reusing the RAM. Things that are still perfectly fine depending on the games you want to play. You're probably going to be behind the minimum specs of any modern title. And there does become a point if you want to enjoy Fallout, well, I guess Fallout 3 you could probably still play on this system, maybe. But if you want to play GTA 5, you want to play Red Dead Redemption 2, you want to play the new Star Wars games, there comes a point where you have to upgrade your system. It doesn't stay within spec long enough, and some games physically won't even launch if you're too far below the minimum spec. This is still gonna cost you roughly 200 bucks by itself. You also have to update your RAM, and a lot of people don't think about that. The fact that now that systems are on DDR4, you have to add at minimum another 100 bucks of RAM to get 8 gigabytes, which is where still the sweet spot is. So I guess you could actually get 16 gigs now for around 100 bucks. Now you're talking closer to $300. And then you're still gonna be stuck on this, and you're still gonna be stuck on that. So the upgrade path still makes sense to make your IO bottleneck removed, and then to get a graphics card that's not so powerful that it's bottlenecked by your current CPU and memory, but fast enough so that when you do upgrade that stuff, this doesn't become what you're embarrassed about. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start things off here with just a simple boot test. All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Pinnacle of cooling technology.
Oh, there it is. Really?
What? Microsoft asked me to make a picture for the account.
Actually, not that bad. I think you were saying that too yesterday. That you were like, you know, it's actually doing pretty well. We're gonna leave the SSD plugged in the way that it is, or not the SSD, but the hard drive, because we don't want to get rid of it. It has value. The hard drive, especially at 2 terabyte, is where we're gonna install most of our games and stuff, because this Inland Professional SSD, this is basically like the OEM brand for Micro Center. They're very inexpensive, and we don't want to completely destroy our budget with going something higher end like Samsung or whatever. So I find we've used these in the past. Actually, we used one of these, I think, when we did Scrapyard Wars back with Luke. Luke, I am your father. All right, so that is in there now. We need our Windows install media. Okay, so here we are. We're gonna go ahead and do a stopwatch test. We're gonna time the part to what it takes to unpack the files, install, and then you have to log in or do your first Windows setup with the blue screen and all the data mining you have to turn off with Windows. So let's go ahead and do this in 3, 2, 1, go. Eight minutes and 35 seconds. Oh, Cortana's listening. How is she listening? There's no microphone. Anyway, it's actually more like 7 minutes and 30-ish seconds, because I spent about a minute on a reboot waiting for this to boot up because I didn't take the key out after it was done copying files, and the BIOS just automatically has a USB, I think, prioritized as a boot drive, even on old hardware. So as you can see right there, there's definitely a benefit to an SSD. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna go ahead and run through all the setup stuff. All right, so we're at the desktop. Let's go ahead and start with a shutdown speed. See how fast that goes. That's improved. It's just gonna take the hardware longer to actually shut down.
Dude, that's
wow,
so
because it was waiting for Windows to shut. Remember how in the last video I had time to finish killing the ship I was working on, close out of World of Warships, which is a slow app to close, and then shut down the computer before you, which had started while I was still playing the game. So we don't remember exactly what the boot time was on the previous test. We think it's around 30-something seconds, which really isn't that bad. Yeah, it's on screen, right? That's what it was. I remember now. That's it right there. So what we're gonna do now is another boot test. And most of this time is just gonna be the hardware initializing. So 3, 2, 1. It didn't really change. That's surprising. Okay, so maybe that wasn't quite as impressive as I wanted it to be. What took so long in that last video, and I know I said this, was that I was like, this video won't take that long to film, but then I underestimated how long the setup took and how long it took to download this stuff and get it all set up. Was completely underestimated. So what we're noticing now though is that by running the SSD, even on SATA 2, that we are seeing a massive increase in our download speeds. So what you can see right here, if I expand this, is that we never had a dropout in the network. And you can see the network is following the curve of the green line, which is the disk usage. Typically what I see is disk usage be much lower than the actual network. That's because I'm used to much newer systems. So what we're showing here, and one of the reasons why you don't want to go with like a super expensive or even a super fast SSD is because of the fact that, well, we are still dealing with the limitations of SATA 2, whereas all the newer drives like the SATAs and stuff, or SSDs are all SATA 3 optimized. But what we never saw were any dropouts, which we were dealing with a ton. So that tells me, and I thought that that was a bad network card on that motherboard. Yesterday we thought there was something wrong with the network card. This shows there's nothing wrong with the network card, although we never got the full download speed that we are capable of. I think the network card itself may not be capable of as fast as the internet that we have here. But it started the download at 207, finished at 213. So 6 minutes to download and install a 7.5 gigabyte game. That's really not bad. So when the hard drive is also your operating system drive, and you have a spinning platter and you have a needle that has, it's like a record, right? I want to hear this song. Well, it's got to go find that song based on where it is on the record. It's a very oversimplified explanation of how the platter works, but it's the same general idea. So if you are asking the operating system to run off the hard drive, and then you want to install something in a certain location, and then you want to play a game that's in another location, it's constantly seeking and doing these things. So that's why you would hear the hard drive clicking away the more it's used. So that's why I always, on budget builds, will do an SSD with a large hard drive. And there's a lot of people that still push back and say, nope, I would rather just get a hybrid drive. Well, we actually had a hybrid drive here. It was pretty bad. All the hybrid drive does is get you a small, tiny SSD cache on there. And the problem is modern programs with their sizes and the games and all that sort of stuff are swapping out that cache constantly, which has to access the drive to refill it. And it just slows down too quickly because the hybrids never took off. They never became a thing. And so they never got bigger caches on them. So anyway, rant over. I'd like to point out now, as I'm about to start Left 4 Dead 2, that we started this whole process of even upgrading the computer and installing Windows an hour ago. Yesterday, all day. Yeah, we started at 9 a.m.
and started filming at
like 4:30. So we're gonna do the campaign only because that's how we get to do the direct comparison to our previous video where you were getting like 30-ish, 40-ish FPS, and then it would like spike to like 50. Look at the FPS. I can't even tell you what the FPS is. This is so much better. And that's why you don't go with a ridiculously overpriced, because it would be such a diminishing return. Let's put it this way, if you had both these towers up, but I couldn't see what we were connected to, and I had that budget one we used, which was a much better system all around, or this one, I wouldn't be able to tell which one we're playing on. Left 4 Dead 2 was surprising in our last video because it's Steam source engine, or it's a Valve source engine, but it was a heck of a lot harder to run than Counter-Strike source. So I was surprised that you were getting as many dips as you were in the FPS. What we're gonna do is 3D Mark Vantage now to compare the previous scores. All right, so apparently we broke the benchmark, because on 2 different systems, we got a 3D Mark score of 0. I think what's happening is it reaches a point where the numbers are too high. Anyway, we went from a 6772 GPU score to a 20,457. As expected, our CPU score did not change, 10,145, and that's still pretty much what we got on the previous test. It was 10,001 something. So obviously we got a much better performance out of this system for the use of gaming than anything else. But the snappiness of the SSD obviously helps. When I talked about general snappiness though, when it comes to like clicking on things, right? Here's the internet. Yeah, Threadripper mistakes video. Jeez, man, these YouTubers and their ads. What I kind of want to do, and I'm hoping if somebody out there can point me in the right direction, I would love to get my hands on a premium LGA 775 board from the era. That way we can overclock this and play around with it. And it's not really retro tech, but it's definitely old tech that'd be fun to play with and see how much more performance we can get on top of today with just changing out the motherboard. So anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. As you can see by the simple upgrade of a graphics card, giving us really good, and a lot of these tests too, it was still hitting 100% utilization on the graphics card. Obviously on 3D Mark is designed to, but with just an SSD and a graphics card, we were able to wake this system up and make it completely usable once again. So hopefully you guys have appreciated this video, because what I was attempting to show you guys today, as I now do a really fast shutdown, is you don't need to spend all kinds of money. You don't need to break the bank, take out mortgages, or piss off your spouses and stuff by spending tons and tons of money on a new computer. We like to, it's fun, but not necessary. And hopefully we showed that today. You can intelligently upgrade your system piece by piece. This graphics card and this SSD would be perfectly usable in a system in 2019. So obviously if you have a system this old, you can upgrade it piece by piece, where next you get yourself a decent motherboard, CPU, and memory combo, and maybe a little bit better power supply, nicer case. You would never know that you did this incrementally, which is the smarter way to do it. So thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and you know what to do, give it a big thumbs up. If you hated this video for whatever reason, you were gonna thumbs it down and probably have already anyway, so whatever. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. And everyone asked where I got this screwdriver. Amazon. It was literally the cheapest one they had. I'll put the link to that down in the description maybe.